Hey, Sly Bald Dude. It's a pretty cool name. I kind of can identify with the name a little bit. I wanted to respond to your video before I go to bed. That's why it's so dark. I also wanted to apologize ahead of time. I'm getting over a cold, so if I make some noises, it's because I've been a little bit sick. So, you said a number of things in your video, a number of questions that I wanted to answer. One of them is that you said that there was something built into us that seems to give us the idea that there is something greater than ourselves, a God maybe. That is why people worship gods. I just wanted to say that I don't believe that that is so. I don't believe that there's anything built into us to make us religious. I, in fact, believe that the religious tendency that is within us is something else altogether. It's a defense mechanism to get rid of anxiety over death, either by telling us that there's a life after death or by telling us that all of the attributes of nature or all of the things that want to kill us, like war, are actually in the form of gods or goddesses, and that if we appease them in some way, that they will intervene on our behalf, and we will be more likely to not be killed in war, not be killed by disease, not have failing crops, that kind of thing, and that it is some kind of magic kind of thinking in which we engage in sort of magical rituals that we think will beseech the gods to intervene on our behalf. What we've done over time is we've simply integrated all of these gods into one god that we can appeal to, but it is the exact same effect. Excuse me. We are in effect trying to get rid of anxiety by appealing to a god who isn't there and can't help us. So I think that what happens when we do this appealing is that it can be helpful in the sense that it lowers our stress. And by lowering our stress and by focusing our attention in the same direction through a religion, by putting the fear of God, in quotation marks, into us and making us all behave, it can make a society function. So there is an old saying that says that wealthy people do not believe in gods. Uh, Poor people do, and rulers find gods extremely useful. And I think that that's how religion has developed over time as a tool of engineering of society to control people, and to do so by taking social control and defense mechanisms to reduce anxiety and integrating them together so that they happen at the same time and they're related. That way we can control people by having control over that which reduces their anxiety. You said what happens after you die, and the answer to that is that there's absolutely no way of knowing other than killing yourself, which I'm not encouraging anyone to run such an experiment, but quite frankly, there's no way of knowing until you die. Now, if you believe that the seat of consciousness is your brain, and that consciousness, in fact, is your brain, then when your brain is destroyed, then you have to at least believe that your consciousness is going to be destroyed in the form that it is now, at the very least. So making the assumption that death is oblivion would not be a bad assumption, but it is just an assumption. You said that that's depressing. Well, it's only depressing if you've always believed otherwise. It's like believing that you were going to grow up to be a millionaire because that's what your parents told you, and then when you returned 18, your parents laughed at you and told you it was all a joke and that you're actually a pauper. You would probably find that very difficult to deal with. But finding out you were a pauper, if you had always known that you were, would not be a very difficult thing to deal with. Also, a person who grows up knowing that they're going to die and quite possibly cease to exist, or at least have no guarantee that they will continue to exist, and grows up with that idea and has parents helping them with that idea, they develop ways of dealing and coping with that someone like you yourself or someone like myself might not have if they didn't grow up with that. Now, I grew up as a Catholic and I became an atheist when I was about 13 or so, but I can tell you that when I first became an atheist, the idea of what would happen after I died was a very frightening and a very eerie and a very weird thing. It isn't that way for me anymore, not even remotely. So I realized that eerie feeling was the result, or was an artifact of the lies that I had believed when I was a younger person. You said, are fundamentally religious people less mentally stable? I don't believe that you can whitewash an entire group of people like that. Do I believe that fundamentally religious people are less likely statistically to be mentally unstable? And my answer is yes, for a number of reasons that may not reflect on fundamentalist religion. First of all, people who are unstable are going to be attracted to fundamentalist religions to try to stabilize themselves. Also, there's some evidence to show that people who are more gullible, more highly hypnotizable, and more suggestible are more likely to be more religious and more deeply religious. Those are findings that have been shown across the board in numerous countries. You said that there's no accountability, and you felt that there would be no accountability without your Christianity, and yet some of the most guilt-ridden people who have such high concepts of accountability, where they feel responsible for everything, that I have known in my life have been atheists. So the idea that one would have to be a Christian or at least believe in God in order to feel a sense of accountability is bizarre. That's something that only Christians believe, because those two things are highly connected for them. For the rest of them, it's not. Accountability is a human concept that predates Christianity, and it exists independently of religion. You said that you didn't think it was possible for a fundamentalist Christian to become an atheist. Well, I grew up as a Catholic and I became an atheist. And I found your statement that that's not possible to be astonishing. I found that really fascinating and astonishing, that someone obviously as intelligent as yourself would not at least be aware that not only are there fundamentalist Christians who become atheists, there are fundamentalist Christians who become atheists all over the place. It happens all the time. In fact, there's an organization called Fundamentalist Christians Anonymous, which is for former fundamentalist Christians to come together and talk to each other and help them with their removal out of the faith. And their main reason for that is to see the inherent cruelties in religion, specifically the inherent cruelties of fundamentalist Christian religion, especially towards women and gay people, especially gay people. But maybe 6 or 7 decades back, it was black people and a number of other groups of people that there was an inherent cruelty towards. Not to mention the fact that there is just a basic lack of evidence to have such a cocksure attitude. I mean, a fundamentalist, whether they're a Christian or whether they're a Muslim, is effectively someone who believes that their religious text is inerrant. Anybody who knows anything about how the Bible or the Quran or any holy book anywhere was put together, and knows anything about how things were written down on scraps of leather and on stone and on bits of bone and on in people's minds, and how one person told another person who told another person, and that this is the kind of hearsay of how history was done in the past, knows that if you go back more than 200 or 300 years, it starts to become black, and if you get all the way back to the ancient world, you've got a black hole. We just don't know what happened back then. It's better, in fact, to dig things up out of the ground and do anthropology and to look at a whole number of physical things that we can look at and talk about and look at, rather than reading actual history from that time, which is usually biased. It's usually written by a king in order to do some kind of political thing. It usually has nothing to do with facts. So the point that I'm trying to make is that the movement from fundamentalism to atheism is in fact something that's happened for centuries and has in fact happened all the time and is in fact